Well, Dr. Robert Redfield comes back to join us again. He, of course, is a virologist, infectious disease expert, former director of the CDC, was on the White House Coronavirus Task Force, and was on the board for Operation Warp Speed. He has a new book called Redfield's Warning, What I Learned But Couldn't Tell You Might Save Your Life. I am absolutely fascinated to hear what is in that book. We'll be joined a little later by John Solomon. He's an award-winning journalist, the founder of Just the News. Talk a little bit about the Occupy DC movement, also some exclusive material on Comey, and also Director Patel is pushing out Operation Arctic Frost material. We're going to find out more about that, and then finally, Paul Mauro will give us a report from DC on what is going on the Occupy DC movement. Back with Dr. Robert Redfield right after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for Christ's sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I've spent most of my career dealing with illnesses that shorten life, and now we have ways to extend it and extend wellness. I've been working with the team over at V-Shred to develop a product that has everything I want in a longevity supplement. NR Boost has nicotinamide riboside. You know how metal can rust? Well, your body behaves in a similar way. It's mediated through something called NAD. NAD falls as we age, so we're less able to fight off that oxidative process. We oxidize much like that metal. And NAD fights it, but nicotinamide riboside elevates NAD so we can push back on those oxidative stressors, improving health, improving longevity. The other product is Senosync, has fisetin, one of the key molecules to fight off zombie cells, and we've added resveratrol to that, which is a well-known anti-aging antioxidant again. I don't like supplements that have a ton of ingredients. To me, it suggests that none of it's working. When I prescribe a medication, I prescribe that medicine because I expect that to work. That is exactly what I've done with these products. And I want you to go to drdrew.com/vshredmd for 10% off. Again, that is drdrew.com/vshredmd.
The vaccines that we develop for COVID do not prevent infection.
But I think there was a decision not to do anything that made the vaccine sound like it didn't work.
Safe and effective.
Wait a second, this isn't natural. In 2014, this lab actually published a paper that they put the H2 receptor into humanized mice so it can infect human tissue. And then you learn that the new COVID, which came from bats, now can hardly replicate in bats. This was most likely to come from the lab.
And there we are. The new book is called Redfield's Warning, What I Learned But Couldn't Tell You Might Save Your Life. Do get the book. Do read the book. Do support Dr. Redfield's efforts here. He is can also be followed at gbmc.org. He is currently practicing at GBMC Health Partners. He is a graduate of Georgetown Medical School. He is a virologist, was a chief of infectious diseases at UMD. He has co-founded the University of Maryland's Institute of Human Virology. And he was in the middle of the COVID thing. And last time I talked to him, he was concerned about some of the decisions that were made during that era. And it sounds like those concerns have coalesced, or at least have sharpened a bit. Dr. Redfield, we appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Drew. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's finish our memory discussion, which we were having off the air. You said you had a photographic memory when you were younger, and you fired off all of my own sort of anxieties and misery about the aging process. Well, I had a screen memory system that I could just play. It wasn't necessarily taking pictures of pages like you could, and now I can't do that anymore, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I was, I think that's how I got through medical school, and you said it right. I took pictures of pages. So I would have to replay the picture, and then I'd see the page. And when I read a book or something, I read by taking a picture of the page. And that's just the way my brain worked. So it worked really well until I was probably about 65, 70. And now the picture isn't as clear as it used to be.
That's so. It's just so. I've that because I have a son that has that memory too, and we always tell him, "Hey, play the tape back. What happened when we were, January 3rd? Play the tape," and he can play it. And I used to kind of have that too, particularly autobiographical stuff. And when that started going away, I thought, oh, aging is about things being taken from you. That's really what it is. It just takes one thing after another. It just whittles away. So
well, we always say that, and then I always remind myself it's better than the alternative.
It is better than the alternative, 100%. So let's talk about, speaking of alternative approaches, let's talk about Redfield's warning. I am particularly fascinated by the couldn't tell you in the parentheses part of the book. I don't want you to necessarily give us give away everything to, so people won't read the book, but what was it you couldn't tell us? And respectfully, how do you defend that?
Well, some of it, Dr. Drew, is that, and unfortunately, some of it still is classified. So I really can't get into that space. And I will say I didn't expect as CDC director that I would spend so much time with the national security folks and in a lot of classified space, whether it was the Ebola outbreaks in the DRC, or whether, of course, it was a lot of the evolution of COVID, particularly as relates to the origin of the virus. And my own conclusion, which I'm allowed to have, is that the virus was a consequence of gain-of-function research in the laboratories in Wuhan, and it wasn't a consequence of natural evolution. Obviously, there are other things that had to do with discussions on policy, as you'll get into more. And clearly, COVID, unfortunately, was a time where the government demonstrated, I think, significant government overreach on a number of policy issues. But those, again, were discussed in sort of confidential discussions within, say, the Situation Room, and they really weren't available for public consumption. That's all. I always did try to tell people, though, the truth of what I believed, and tried to give them the best advice I could. But I will say, I don't think we had the freedom. And, when this next administration came and I was given maybe the opportunity to go back in a different position, I decided to stay out because I actually felt I could be much more effective on the outside because I had the freedom to tell people what I really think without anybody deciding whether I can or can't.
It's sort of immediately in most people's minds, they're going to think, aha, that's why Fauci lied, or that's why he was so circumspect under, under questioning by, say, Paul Ryan, or by Dr. Who am I thinking of? Speaking of memory difficulties.
Winthrop? Dr. Winthrop?
No. His dad's a famous libertarian. He's an ophthalmologist.
Rand Paul.
Ron Paul.
Yeah.
Is it reasonable to look at Fauci's performance in those appearances and say he was unable to answer those things because of these same concerns?
I don't think so. I mean, two things. One thing that many Americans don't know, and of course, prayers out for Dick Cheney's family. When Dick Cheney in 2002, he made a decision because of his concerns about our biodefense program. He decided to move it from the U.S. Army Fort Detrick program that I was part of at Walter Reed. They moved it to NIH and put it under the direction of Tony Fauci. So many people don't know this, that in addition to being the head of NIAID and having all our research funding under him, he also had another $40 billion of defense funding that was under him. And a lot of that, of course, was classified work, and I don't know the specifics. I think Tony's biggest issue, in my own view, was that he said it, and you had it in the run-up, Tony, basically said to the American public that if you disagree with him, you disagree with science because he's science. And I think Tony had a very strong passion for gain of function research. Him and I argued about it.
Why? What is that? Why would he want to do that? I mean, I mean, I'm just thinking of the risk reward. I mean, okay, other countries are doing it, but my God, let's get them to stop before we jump in on this and make the matters worse.
Well, I agree with you. I think for him, unfortunately, and I don't mean to be negative, but it was a sense of arrogance that he felt he could control the science, he can control the downside. I had a different point of view, my op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, where I called for a moratorium on gain-of-function research, because like you, I don't think we should be doing that research. We got enough challenges as it is with not making pathogens more pathogenic. And he worked pretty hard to orchestrate a way for him to do that. If you ever watch his testimony, he says, according to the official definition of the National Academy of Science, NIH was not funding gain-of-function research. And it's a nuance, because what had happened is the National Academy defined gain-of-function research once Obama said we can't do it in the United States. They defined it in a very narrow way, that if you start with a pathogen that's pathogenic for humans, and you make it more transmissible or more pathogenic, that's gain-of-function research. But if you start with a pathogen that's not pathogenic for humans, like let's say COVID-19, and you teach it how to be pathogenic for humans, by definition, that's not gain-of-function research. Well, that's obviously ridiculous, okay? That we're creating these pathogens that are highly pathogenic for humans. And it's my view that the COVID pandemic, and I've said this to you before, was not a consequence of nature or natural evolution. It was a direct consequence of science. And unfortunately, Tony was a champion of doing that science. And I think he was a champion of it because he really did believe it was going to lead more readily to opportunities to improve the human condition. I disagreed with him. I thought it was too dangerous. Like you, I didn't think the risk-benefit ratio was in favor. And the fact is, our scientific power is so great right now that we can figure out something literally within weeks with science. We don't need to create a pathogen in order to figure out how the pathogen's going to be created.
And was part of his enthusiasm the mRNA technology? In other words, so I mean, the two went hand in hand, right? You had to have the pathogen, and then we could. Did he have any concerns about that technology? I mean, back to risk reward, which I want to talk about in a minute, but if you have cancer, well, let's take the risk. That's fine. But if you're a healthy 20-year-old, what are we doing with this thing that hasn't been fully tested yet?
You and I think very much alike, and that's why I enjoy you and your show so much, is that I think the mRNA technology will no longer be used for preventive vaccines within a couple of years. I do think the mRNA technology will be used for treating serious disease, like you mentioned, cancer.
Sure.
I think the reality is, when we give an mRNA to a healthy individual, we don't, and in the case of COVID, we co-opt the body to make spike protein, which is an immunotoxic protein. We have no idea how much you're going to make. We don't know how long you're going to make it. These are things that I think the FDA should have been much more aggressive in having defined. Maybe, I was part of Warp Speed's board. Maybe when we were losing 3,000 people a day, there was an emergency we were trying to respond to. And these vaccines, in my view, do change mortality and morbidity for highly vulnerable individuals. But they don't have a benefit, in my view, for people who aren't highly vulnerable. So therefore, people under the age of 50, children, they really probably never should have been pushed in that direction. This is part of government overreach. Tony had a sort of a blind belief that these vaccines could only be good, and he didn't see the downside. You're in practice, I'm in practice. A significant percentage of my practice, maybe 5 to 10% of it now, is vaccine injury from the mRNA vaccines, and those injuries are very real. and they're really problematic. So I do agree with you. It's about a risk-benefit ratio, and for a preventive initiative, I think the favor is not in this new technology. For someone that has a very serious cancer, it probably is in this technology. But Tony was very embedded in the mRNA technology. I mean, as you know, NIH was very involved in it with Moderna. And it did lead to certain statements that he made, which I felt were unfortunate, where he told the American public, if you disagree with me, you disagree with science. And my argument to him is, Tony, I don't disagree with science. I disagree with you.
Exactly. And science is not a person or a personality. It's a methodology that's very delicate, as I've tried to point out many times. But, I saw people like Mark Cuban go, well, if we had just vaccinated everybody faster, that would have been the end of the entire thing. The fact that people can still say that, smart people can still say that, is so shocking to me. But I want to go past that and talk a little bit more about the unrestricted production by the mRNA.
I will say
process,
one thing on that. I want to say one thing real quick on that, because it's so important. And I do think it's unfortunate that the public health community wasn't more aggressive in educating the American public that this vaccine never prevented infection. So
exactly,
it never prevented infection. And you and I know that.
It never prevented spread. It never prevented infectivity.
It never prevents spread. You and I know, because we observe, and that's really the important part of being a doctor. When I was CDC director, by March and April, I was seeing patients getting their second case of COVID. So I knew natural infection didn't prevent reinfection. So why did I think a vaccine was going to do that? And of course, we found it didn't do it. And it didn't prevent acquisition at all. And I will tell you, because I gave a talk today to a lot of very smart people, about 150 smart people in Baltimore, most of them actually believe that the vaccine prevents infection. So we haven't educated the American people that this vaccine never. And part of the problem, if you remember, when the vaccine, I was out of office within 4 weeks of the vaccine being approved, so we weren't involved in the actual policy. But the first thing that the Biden administration did was they said you need to vaccinate your children so they don't infect grandma. Well, that's not a true statement, because you didn't. Then the second thing they did is you need to be fully vaccinated. What does that mean, fully vaccinated? When I hear the word fully vaccinated, it means, I'm protected. No, you're not fully vaccinated. You had 2 shots. You're not fully vaccinated. So we really did a bad job, in my view, of being honest about the strengths and limitations of COVID vaccine. And I'm very supportive of the current Kennedy's decision and CDC's decision to pull these vaccines back and only recommend them for highly vulnerable people over the age of 65, period.
Yes, that's where I saw it useful too. And I vaccinated my elderly patients, and I believe I did something. But for everybody else, and even for them, we have effective treatments now. We have Paxlovid, we have Molnupiravir, and nobody gets hospitalized with COVID anymore anyway. But the incredibly mystifying thing to me is, okay, during warp speed, spike protein was your target. You needed something fast. You had some mRNA platform that could bring it out. You were trying to save the very much at-risk people. I get it. Why now, 3 years later, 2 years later, when we have the Omicron era, which does not cause serious illness in young people at all, and these days not at all, like zero probability of hospitalization if you're a 20-year-old, and the vaccines are continuing to be directed at the pathogenic mechanism of the virus. Why haven't they not gone back and said, let's have a nuclear capsid protein or a whole virus or something other than spike, which is the pathogenic piece? So now you have 20-year-olds getting the vaccine mandated to go to school, more likely to get myocarditis than serious illness, for sure. Non-zero myocarditis, zero serious illness. That's what we're dealing with, and continue to push this pathogenic process rather than come up with something that is less toxic. Help me understand that.
First, the vaccine should not be, I don't recommend anybody who's not highly vulnerable get vaccinated at all, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, even among the highly vulnerable now, I no longer recommend the mRNA vaccines because when I give you an mRNA vaccine, I turn your body into a spike protein factory. I don't know how much you're going to make, and I don't know how long you're going to make it. That makes me nervous. And I've seen some patients that are clearly still making it 6 months later. So I've moved to just using the killed protein vaccine. It's made by Novavax in those individuals that are highly vulnerable. But for those individuals that are not highly vulnerable, they should not. The COVID vaccine has no role. Now, it's going to be problematic and people like you are going to have to help communicate this effectively. I'll try if I get the opportunity. I know the FDA is reviewing the toxicity issues on the COVID vaccines, so we can be honest about the vaccine injury, which is real. And I have a number of patients, and I think what you're going to see them report, sadly, is the number of children that actually died from the mRNA vaccines. And as you and I know, they didn't need to be vaccinated in the first place. It was government overreach. And these vaccines should have never been mandated. I was very upset with CDC a year ago when they recommended everybody over the age of 1 month of age get the COVID vaccine. Based on what data? There's no data to support that. So I'm happy with Kennedy. People may jump on Kennedy as him being anti-vaccine. I don't think Secretary Kennedy's anti-vaccine. I think he wants honesty about our discussion of vaccines. What data do we have about their safety? What data do we have about their efficacy? I see people, including myself, when I say, well, what do we know about vaccine injury? Immediately people jump at me and say, you're anti-vaccine? No, I just want to know, what do we know about vaccine injury? Or if I ask the question, do we really have any data that there's a benefit from a 1 month old getting a COVID vaccine? Oh, you're against vaccines. No, I'm not against vaccines. Show me the benefit. Where's the data? There is no data. So I think we finally got the COVID vaccines in the right place. Very, older people over 65, significant vulnerabilities from diabetes or hypertension, obesity. But I think the rest of it should go the way of the RSV vaccine, and we should really stop promoting this. The fact that they required, I saw some patients the other day, really problematic. Life has been changed in their 20s because in order to go to college, they had to get this vaccine. Exactly. And guess what happened?
Why can't they sue the college? They should sue those colleges.
They
really should.
As you said, he got myocarditis. They had this 22-year-old had a heart attack.
Oh, terrible. Terrible.
Okay, so
hey, by the way,
we have to educate the American public. We have to educate the American
stuff.
Public.
I'm seeing very strange cardiac anatomy and anatomical. In other words, like I have a patient who had just a sudden hard, like a really crazy long clot in his right coronary artery and clean left system. Clean. Yeah. And I'm like, what is that? That's crazy.
Well, you and I know there's a hypercoagulability, a fibrin clotting. I have a number of patients that I treat with triple anticoagulation therapy because their blood is just clotting with crud, a lot of crud. And I think a lot of it is precipitated by spike protein, the immunotoxic effect of spike protein. And a lot of it is also precipitated. I remind people that, COVID is not a lung disease. It's a blood vessel disease. And it really messes up our blood vessels, not to mention just our artery, but it messes up our veins. Our veins don't function properly.
Yeah. I think of it as an endotheliitis. That's
You're
the way
exactly
I think about
right.
it.
That's exactly right. It has to do. It has to do. Yeah. The H2 receptor is a key receptor in that endothelium. Yeah. And the spike protein, when it interacts with it, causes an inflammation of that endothelium, and then the endothelium doesn't work properly.
Mm-hmm. It's craziness.
I will tell you, Dr. Drew, I have a lot of patients that you would have figured this out, but they're starving for air, they can't breathe. And when I evaluate, and it's not comfortable to be in the room with them because they really can't. Oh. They feel like that they're suffocating. Terrible. All right. And when you evaluate their hearts, they're normal. And most of them have come to me after evaluation. They've had cardiac casts. They're totally normal. Their pulmonary functions are normal. Their lungs are normal. Their A1C is normal. So why can't they breathe? And what I figured out, and I have a number of them now, they can't breathe because they're not returning their blood to the heart because it's getting stuck in the pelvis because of what we call pelvic vein compression syndrome. Their veins can't stay open, so when the iliac artery goes over the vein, it blocks it, and then they form a bunch of accessories and more blood's in the pelvic vein. And the way we finally treat them, and they literally get cured within hours, is I put a pelvic vein stent in them and open up their veins, and they can now breathe. And I have a lot of letters from them now. They think I'm some type of, hero for saving their lives because they lived for 2 years where they thought they were suffocating every minute of their life.
It's like a pre-shunt shunt. It's like
That's right.
a left to right shunt. Weird. But just two quick things from me. One is, as far as goes to the vaccinating the elderly people, even or not. I tell my patients now, I go, look, if you want the vaccine, you're 75 years old, you're 80 years old, I'm not going to stop you. But if you want me to recommend it, I cannot, because I have other treatments for you. You're not going to be hospitalized from it. You've had previous vaccines. You've had the COVID illness. We have good treatment, as I said. And the vaccine that's being offered is against a subvariant that doesn't exist in our community anymore. And it's not been shown to reduce hospitalization or transmission. So I don't know what I'm doing. I can't recommend it to you because I just don't understand it.
So you're not that far from me. I'd still recommend only the protein vaccine, but it's a challenge because it's non-durable. So I recommend it every 4 to 6 months, which a lot of people don't agree with me. But I do say if you're uncomfortable with the vaccine, no problem. Just get home testing. And if you think that if you have COVID, I tell people, let's get on Paxlovid or Molnupiravir. I do tell them, please don't take it right away. Wait about 24 to 48 hours. Because, if you don't treat somebody with COVID, they have about a 3% chance of relapse. If you treat someone with Paxlovid, they have about a 20% chance of relapse. And it has to do
rebound.
And yes, I mean rebound. When I say relapse, I mean rebound. But it has to do with timing. If you don't start the treatment until, say, 48 or 72 hours, most of these patients are effectively, they don't rebound. But I agree with you. So that's, the people that worry about the vaccine, don't worry about it. Just make sure, I write them a prescription, for Paxlovid, have it at home. You don't have to get it right away. And here's home testing, and you can manage this. Because if you treat yourself with Paxlovid or Molnupiravir, you're not going to die from COVID.
No way. And in my experience, that rebound is a very characteristic syndrome of cough. Like this cough comes back, and it's kind of crazy. But there are two big questions I have that I want to kind of head towards as we wrap up here. One is Francis Collins said something in public that I was gobsmacked by. I found incomprehensible that a physician, I don't know if he's ever practiced medicine, maybe he hasn't, maybe that's why he could say something like he did about how he did not consider any risk of the interventions that were being taken to stop this virus. He was only about stopping the virus. That is the opposite of medical practice. That is throwing away completely the do no harm mandate.
Everything we learned.
Do no harm. Number one. The do no harm is number one. And that is tossed out the window when you take no concern of risk.
Well, and we felt that. I mean, this is why I recommended against closing schools. I felt that the K through 12's public health was much better served if they just stayed in school rather than getting them out of school. And of course, unfortunately, I was proven to be correct in my view that closing the schools was a big mistake. Shutting down medical practices, which you know of. I mean, how much now advanced cancer have we seen because we stopped all of the preventive care for cancer? Big mistake. So Francis was way off. I mean, I don't think Francis was a practicing physician. He was a genetic gene jockey type of guy. So I don't think that he had that experience because the truth is a lot of the public policies, and you'll get it in the book that I wrote, I try to be honest about the mistakes that were made because there were a lot of mistakes made. All right. And, for anything, one of the biggest mistakes, and, you've been a voice against this, one of the biggest mistakes is that we shut down any debate. if you didn't agree with the party line, like someone like myself that recommended, this virus came from China. I mean, I had front page newspaper articles written about me that I was a racist, an Asian racist. Why? Because my scientific judgment was this virus did not evolve from nature. All right. And when you think about how they just shut down any debate, if I question the efficacy, safety of a vaccine, you immediately got boxed and anti-vaccine. I'm one of the most pro-vaccine people around. That's one of the reasons I'm trying to help Kennedy, because I don't think he's anti-vax. And I want to show people here, wait, I'm pro-vaccine. I spent my life developing vaccines. Kennedy just wants honesty about vaccines. Let's be honest. Do they work? Do they not work? What do we know? What do we not know?
Yep.
And don't get, don't shut off debate. We shut off the part when you read the book.
Oh my God,
part of it is debate was shut off. If you didn't agree with the party line, when CDC, after I left CDC, there were people that were vaccinated that got infected. All right. So they got infected after the vaccine. You know what CDC did?
Yep.
They stopped recording it. So when you ask CDC, were there people that were vaccinated that got infected, they said we don't have any reports of that, because they stopped following it. And the reason they stopped following it is people convinced that you can't have anything that suggested the vaccine didn't work, because somehow that would discourage people from getting vaccinated. Why should they get vaccinated? Because certain people decided that you needed to be vaccinated, not because we knew the vaccine worked. And we actually did know from the beginning, and you know this, Dr. Drew, we knew from the beginning it didn't stop transmission. It didn't stop infection.
I know that. I know. And to me, this whole thing begs a question of what is wrong with our public health training, our public health system, our public health practitioners. There's something wrong. There's something philosophically or trained, or something is wrong, where they become hysterical, they have groupthink, they put their interventions above everything else, including constitutional privileges and everything.
It's really wrong.
Something is wrong.
When Kennedy decided to change the ACIP, got a lot of bad press on that. Now, what you needed to know, that the 13 of the 17 members of the ACIP were appointed by Biden in his last year. And several of them were appointed after the election that he lost. So knowing that vaccines are important to Kennedy, basically 14 of the 17 people were appointed for a 4-year stint in the last year. So in other words, Kennedy was going to have no impact on the people on that committee, right? So he decided the simplest thing was just to have them all resign and he'll redo the committee. Now, why is that not a bad idea? When you looked at the ACIP, and they used to respond to me when I was CDC director, do you know what the average vote is on an issue that goes up against that committee when I was in charge? 17-0, 16-1. There was no debate. There was no difference of opinion. I want to see the vote be 10-7. 12-5. I want to see some honest debate about whether we should do this or not. And when you get a 17-0, 16-1 vote, that's not happening. There's one voice, whatever the dominant opinion is.
Science.
It's not science. It's not science. And so when you ask what we can do, we have to promote, and we should help this in young doctors, we have to promote people to basically speak out and say, wait a minute, I don't think the emperor has any clothes. I don't think this makes sense. So, your show's important. What you do is important. You've always been a great voice in this. And I think we just have to continue to encourage. And hopefully, my book, when people read it, they'll realize that a lot of the decisions that were made, and I was part of some of them, they weren't right. So let's just acknowledge it. They weren't right. And why weren't they right? I would argue because we didn't foster debate and have an honest debate and difference of opinion. Because everyone said you can't have debate. Wonderful. No, you got to have debate.
I agree. It's my last question is something we sort of put in our headline, which is, you put out a warning that the next pandemic may be amongst us already. I think you're talking about the bird flu maybe evolving or maybe somebody working on the bird flu. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, I'm very worried about the bird flu. Okay, bird flu, as you know, in 2019, it came into our birds. We're already in over 100 million of our turkeys and chickens. And over the last 5 years, it's gone now into well over 50 mammals in the U.S., including, bears and bobcats and seals and dolphins, and cats and dogs. Now, it hasn't learned how to go mammal to mammal yet, but it's trying. It's learned how to get into dairy cows. It's learned how to get into pigs. And pigs make me nervous because, as you know, the flu virus has multiple different replication pieces. And when the two viruses get in the same animal at the same time, they can recombine in different ways. And the pig is a great one for helping teach flu viruses how to infect humans. So, I'm concerned. I actually don't think it's going to happen by nature, because I don't think people have taken my warning about gain of function research. It's 4 amino acids that need to change to make the bird flu highly infectious for humans. We've published what those amino acid changes need to be, so it's no secret. The roadmap's out there. And I just think it's unfortunately very probable that science, once again, will be misused by people who think they're helping out, only to have a negative outcome. So I'm very worried about bird flu. I think it is the next pandemic. I call it the great pandemic. I consider COVID just a minor pandemic. And I've argued in the book, and I make the argument that biosecurity is one of our critical national security threats, and we're not prepared proportional to the threat. And we need to make a program to get prepared proportional to the threat, which means advancing antiviral drug development, vaccine development, diagnostic development, countermeasure development. You know, when we had the COVID pandemic, we didn't have ventilators. I mean, how can you not have ventilators when you know that the respiratory pandemic is coming? So, yeah, I do think, I hate to say this, because when I went to CDC, one of the reasons my wife and I chose to do it when we were asked is I had a premonition that we were going to have a pandemic. And I felt, as a virologist who trained in vaccines all my life, I was well trained to sort of take the helm and go down and do it. And I thought it was going to be a bird flu pandemic, but lo and behold, it was COVID-19. But I do think we're at high risk for a bird flu pandemic. And that is the warning. And the warning is to get prepared. Get prepared. And the preparation is not vaccine development. The preparation is antiviral drug development.
Dr. Redfield, I do appreciate you joining me. Every time you join us, it's always thrilling for me. And to hear your assessments, it's actually a relief. It's a relief to hear you say some of the things you're saying. Other than Redfield's warning, which everyone needs to go out and read, where would you like people to find you?
Actually, the best for me is rrredfieldmd@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to find me. I'm sort of not that tech savvy, so that's the best way for me to, and that's where I've gotten a lot of referrals for, I run a clinic now for long COVID and vaccine injury from COVID. And I've got referrals from times I did your podcast and Dana Parrish's podcast and Chris Como's podcast, so I really enjoy the opportunity to serve and take care of these people. Because I will say, sadly, most of the patients that I see have been told by multiple doctors that the only doctor they need is a psychiatrist.
Yeah, I'm sure. rrredfield@gmail.com, correct?
rrredfieldmd.
rrredfieldmd@gmail.com.
That's it.
Thank you, sir. Talk soon, I hope.
Yeah, thanks. God bless you. Yep, take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.
All right, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, John Solomon joins us. He can be followed at Solomon Reports, also Just the News on X. He is the founder of Just the News, and he's an AP reporter, and we are going to talk with him, amongst other things, about new insights into the Comey case, sure, as well as unrest at the Occupy Wall Street. Am I hearing you, Caleb, in there?
Yeah, sorry, real quick. I wanted to explain what this video was that I showed while he was talking. I saw this and it really made me think, we have to talk about this on the show. This is the first ever video captured of a rat actually grabbing a bat out of the air, attacking it, and then eating it. And they're saying some scientists are looking at this as possible evidence of methods that viruses cross between bats over to mice. If the mice were able to catch them out of the air and eat them, they're running with a theory.
Remember, but you're looking at that a little too literally. Remember, these are respiratory viruses. So
not
getting
specifically
into your
for
mouth,
COVID. Yeah. Not specific COVID, but for this is
a
now
lot of the bad
possible.
viruses. A lot of the bad viruses are sort of that kind of. But it's an interesting thing. The bird flu. We'll have to look up how that's transmitted. But yeah, that's very interesting. And of course, there's a million ways. But you got to remember the way it can get in. It has to change its chemistry so it can bind at the cell receptor, and that's a whole different thing than just getting into the system, getting into the GI system. But again, this is if they do that a lot, they maybe a few have adapted to that mechanism. It can then thereby get in through the mouth or something. It's a complicated process. All right, John Solomon, when we return. The Wellness Company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/TWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there. Hey, Dr. Drew here, and this is Susan, my wife of 34 years. And Susan, I told you remember, we need to get the whole family on fatty, and we finally did.
The inflammation in my joints has been relieved. It's doing great things for my brain.
Douglas has been telling me he has more energy and he sleeps better. I know this is helping me age better and stay well longer. The way our body kind of breaks down, entropy always wins, right? There are 2 laws of thermodynamics, and one of them is complexity always gets more. But the way it does that is through oxidation. Fatty 15 works on these oxidative mechanisms, so the cell membranes are sustained longer, they're not so fragile. That cellular fragility syndrome that they found is improved with fatty. So yes, everybody take fatty. There are a few supplements that people should just be taking, and fatty 15 is one of them. I'm looking to age better. And I know for sure this is one of the longevity supplements. It's the longevity supplement. Inflammation, oxidative stress. You hear those words flying around. This goes at that biochemistry. It stabilizes the cell membrane so the cells don't become senescent and we live healthier longer. Pretty simple. It's one of the supplements that people should just be taking. And when you start it, do not stop it. The research was so crystal clear, and that convinced me to start Fatty 15.
The results convinced me to keep taking it. You can get it at drdrew.com/fatty15 today and get 15% off a 90-day starter kit.
Dr. Drew said the best way to quit drinking is by going cold turkey, and he's a doctor, so why would you question doctors?
Dr. Drew called me unfixable.
And then finally, the Paleo Valley beef sticks. I've lost count of how many of these I've eaten since we started working with this little business. They're terrific. And it's not just the beef sticks, but the venison sticks, the grass-fed finished beef makes them more rich in nutrients. There's never fed grains to these livestock, never given hormones, no antibiotics, high linoleic acid, and of course, that's a potent antioxidant. The chicken and pork are pasture-raised. Love those as well. They're all fermented, which makes them gut-friendly, and Paleo Valley has a ton to offer. The powder, the protein powder, the sticks, the coffee, olive oil, tallow. We use their tallow all the time. Superfood snack bars, they're amazing. Stock up for the holiday and for travel and hosting. And to get a discount, go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order and 20% off when you subscribe. Those beef sticks are amazing. And the nutrient bars are packed with great nutrients. And their base is the protein, the bone powders, which I love also. So there we go. I'm just an enthusiast. All right, John Solomon, you can follow him, Just the News. He has been reporting on some of the more controversial issues, such as the Comey case coming up. I want to hear about that. John, welcome to the program.
Yeah, good to be with you, Dr. Drew.
So what have you uncovered on the Comey case?
Well, listen, the credit goes to the people who found these records hidden in vaults and in burn bags at the FBI, people working for Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. What they show is that there was an investigation in the name of January 6th. We know what happened that day, and there was a riot, and legitimate for the FBI to investigate January 6th. But what they started to do at some point in the FBI about a year later, in April of 2022, like 15 months after the episode, the FBI decided they wanted to look at the entire MAGA world. They basically created a MAGA dragnet. And they came to the idea that what they would investigate is the fact that some people tried to submit alternate elector ballots to the Congress, that would be criminal. Now, there's some interesting things on this. The opening of this case was opened even though the history of the United States has been twice before. In 1876 and 1960, alternate electors were submitted to the Senate. Nobody got prosecuted. It was considered a legitimate political dispute, not a criminal act. But in April of 2022, just a few days after Donald Trump said, you know what, I'm running again in 24, the FBI suddenly decides 15 months into this, we think there's another crime that occurred on January 6th, and we're going to treat it as the submission of these alternate electors. And for the next 2 years, first at the FBI, in a case that was run by, or certainly substantially run by, an anti-Trump agent, someone who was tweeting anti-Trump messages while working for the Bureau, they started to look at everything that was MAGA. Hundreds and hundreds of conservatives and supporters of President Trump, 8 United States senators, 1 House member close to Donald Trump. Many of these people had nothing to do with the electors or even what happened on January 6th, but they were looking at it, gathering 30 million lines of phone data, a significant dragnet. And to people who are now investigating this, and there's a criminal investigation of the FBI of its own people now, it looked like they were just dragging the ocean floor looking for any rusty license plate that they could hang on Donald Trump or any of his supporters. And I think in America, we were formed as a nation back in 1776, rejecting the notion that government could have an open warrant, look at anything and everything in life, try to find a crime and then prosecute you. You got to have a specific crime you're investigating. This doesn't seem to meet that test.
No, it doesn't, nor does so much of the activity that was going on in terms of what is sort of more commonly called lawfare.
Yeah.
And yet, I don't feel that I've felt for quite some time that the legal system itself is out of control. Like the lawyers don't police themselves. I don't know how else to understand it. Go ahead.
Yeah, listen, I think you're right. I think over the last decade, we've seen multiple institutions that used to stay above politics. All right, we know politicians are involved in politics, but the CIA would stay out of it until 2016 and 2019 when they didn't. The FBI traditionally stayed out of it, but they got involved. Now you even see in this case now with the new evidence we just got, that federal judges, a judge named Judge Boasberg, who clearly is no friend of President Trump from his rulings, and a Democrat appointee. But he actually said, you can go get the records of members of Congress, and we're just not going to tell them, despite the separation of powers. And his idea for not telling them was, oh, maybe they'll cheat or try to destroy the evidence. Now, come on. A member of Congress can't go get Verizon to go destroy their phone records. But those are the sort of silly arguments and activities going on that in any other era of American history would have been rejected as Watergate-like. But in this last decade, these institutions that were above politics seem to have been dragged into the political gutter.
Well, is that because of the repeal of the I forget the full name of the act, but the Munt Act?
There's some question about that. I think it's more just a culture. Listen, I think if the FBI wants and the Justice Department wants and they can find a friendly judge, they can interpret a law any way they want. It's a cultural decision at the end of the day. At some point, members of the news media, members of the judiciary, members of the Congress, members of the law enforcement and intelligence committee suddenly felt the need to become the resistance to Donald Trump. There's something about Donald Trump's ascendancy in politics that has driven the system nuts. And all of a sudden, people are doing things to be a member of the resistance rather than fit within the normal traffic lanes that they operate in and often operate quite well. The FBI often does great things, as we've seen in recent months. But I think that culture, that mentality that this was a resistance, not an intelligence agency anymore, it's what leads CIA people to write a fake letter saying, oh, the Hunter Biden laptop, it could be disinformation. No, it wasn't. The FBI had it. They knew for months it was real. That sort of behavior is unprecedented until the last 10 years. I don't know if it's Trump derangement syndrome. I'm certainly not qualified to diagnose it, but there's something weird going on, and these great institutions have gotten pulled into the political gutter in a very dangerous way.
And then at the same time, so now we have this Occupy DC movement, which for which these various organizations are involved in funding and bringing people out. And I guess it kind of dwindled today because everybody went home. Essentially, they got back on their buses that they were paid to come in on and went home. But their stated goal is resurrection. It's the turnover of the administration. He must leave. The duly elected officer must leave office because we said so. That's insurrection, right? And then we're seeing tons of other sort of insurrectoid kinds of movements in terms of local, state, and county and city officials thumbing their nose at the supremacy clause. How is I mean, as opposed to people milling around the Capitol and maybe some of them acting naughty and engaging in some aggression.
And they did.
They broke some laws, but they were not there to insurrect. These are all people explicitly in insurrection. How does that go unnoticed by these people who are so worried about insurrection?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And it really is a 20-year kind of, we kept our eye off the ball too long, and this whole ecosystem built. It started with teaching our children in school, maybe back in the early 2000s, that America wasn't good, that it had a shameful history of slavery only, and that you're either an oppressor or an oppressed. That's the DEI, CRT silliness. It got made a young generation of people believe that the American experience was a bad experience when, while we have our flaws, a lot of it is darn good. And then that Jews ruled the world and Palestinians were the victims, even if they were terrorists. And it kept going, and it kept going, and it kept festering. And you created a receptive audience. And that receptive audience were children in 2005 or 2010. And today they're the early adults that are in those protests, that are people out stomping for Mamdani as a socialist, maybe a Marxist, perhaps a communist in New York City. We created a receptor in a whole generation of America that rejected the way we were and came up with this romanticized idea that turns the world upside down. And now you got paid professional protesters that come in and carry it out every day. And the rule of law, the Constitution, the artifacts at the National Archives are demeaned. And the thing that held us together in difficult times is being eroded. The trust in our own government, the trust in our own American values. And it is not an accident that while this started in education and started in nonprofits and the George Soros world, today our enemies overseas, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, are fomenting this. We recently had a story looking at one of these anarchist groups that was operating right in the shadows of Charlie Kirk's assassination. They're not involved in the assassination, but they're a couple blocks away in Mormon, Utah, and they're out working in Cuba. They're actually in Cuba earlier this year talking about overthrowing the American value system. This system that started with some crazy people or some people that are not normal to the political system festered in now, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry which even our enemies are engaging in. And we're at a really existential moment in the American experience. How we respond to these next few years will define the next generation of America, and it may not look like the past generations of America.
Do you have a prediction and or recommendations?
I try to stay to the facts and leave the policy making and the predictions to people that are better than I. I do think the question we have to really come to grips with is socialism the next form of the Democratic Party? If it is, we got to be honest about it. People need to know. We can't pretend it's not going on. Mamdani is that moment. And the Democrats have to tell us, do they want to be socialists and communists? That's fine. Let us know, and we'll make clear pictures going forward. The Mamdani that ran up until yesterday, and then the Mamdani you saw in the victory speech were two different people. One guy was smooth, and last night he showed a different side. And if that's what the Democratic Party wants to be, you got to tell us. You owe the American people to let us know.
Well, I see what's happened in California, all the manipulation and lies and the distortions, and you can't even imagine how people are being hoodwinked there, and yet they keep falling for it. They keep falling for it. What's new in the Comey case? What's coming down in Operation Arctic Frost? What are we likely to see?
Well, I think the documents that were made public Monday are pretty bombshell. This was James Comey did a filing. I'm a victim. This is only about malicious prosecution because Donald Trump hates me. And they said, but to the contrary, here's your notes and here's your emails. And in these emails, you see James Comey really was sanctioning anonymous leaks that he claimed he didn't sanction. It's his own emails to his own people. And it also looks like there's some hints that maybe there's going to be a superseding indictment. One of the things you see is a document, and in it, James Comey's clearly talking about this intelligence that was intercepted in 2016 that the U.S. government knew that Clinton was thinking of hanging a fake Russian shingle on Donald Trump's campaign house and making up a fake scandal for him. And he said, I didn't know about it, didn't ring true to me. I don't think I knew about it. His own notes, he's writing about it. That looks like something that could come back into the case. And then you have the revelation this morning on our site that the FBI discovered a lot of this evidence was being in the process of being destroyed when Donald Trump came in. They found them in burn bags. They were hidden. They hadn't been turned over to anyone, even though they were responsive to subpoenas. It looks like the beginning of a cover-up. So could there be superseding charges? Possibly. I don't think the Comey case is a simple lying case when we're all done, or your question about whether he told the truth. I think it's going to come down to something a little bit more malicious and bigger.
You know, I was on Gutfeld with a woman whose name escapes me right now. She was in several different administrations, but she was in the first Trump administration, and she said early on, when Trump was sort of putting together that administration, Comey came in, and she said she listened very carefully because Comey pulled him inside and said, "Hey, there's this document going around from Russia where they claim you did all these horrible things." And just I want my job at the FBI. I want to maintain that. Just so you know. Yeah. And he was like using it. He was using it as a way to manipulate the president, right?
That's what it was.
Or it was literally blackmail of sorts.
Yeah. Listen, there's a tape,
or at least extortion.
Yeah.
Is what?
There's a tape of James Comey where he actually admitted, I tricked Mike Flynn, the duly nominated National Security Advisor. I lured him into a trap. He brags about it in some speech he gave. That's not the sort of FBI director Americans expect to have. I think they thought they killed that era after the J. Edgar Hoover era and the 1970s Church Commission that kind of showed the abuses. And we reformed the FBI and it operated great. But the Comey-Wray era seems to go back to that era of maybe the FBI doing subversive things. And I had a story the other day. It's a small story, but I think it speaks volumes. The FBI said, all right, Russia collusion was bad. We admit after the fact we didn't do it right, but it was an aberration. Last week, I broke a story. 2 weeks before Election Day 2020, the same FBI, under a different director, Chris Wray is now operating under him. They're looking through everything of Donald Trump's campaign finance reports, trying to find something they can investigate and hang a criminal case on him 2 weeks before Election Day. Now, that's exactly what they did in Crossfire Hurricane and Russia collusion. They were concocting a case. Here they are 4 years later, doing it with impunity. And they even recommend opening the case, even though by their own admission, the evidence they have is low value and unlikely to be true. That's not an FBI we want working for the American people. And it wasn't working for the American people. It looks like subversive activities like I think the American people thought they defeated 40 years ago. It may have creeped back in a really ugly way. And we got to get a grip on it. We really do.
Well, and it also feels like the subversive tactics they've used against other countries, suddenly they turned it on the domestic population. And that's just unthinkable. What's coming up next for you guys? What do you got on your crosshairs?
Yeah, so we got some really important stories about Mamdani. One that just came out a little while ago. I encourage everybody to read it. It's by the great Jerry Dunleavy, a great investigative reporter. He got inside some of these socialist groups this weekend that were on the ground helping. They invited him in. He was a reporter. But you hear what they believe Mamdani has told them he's going to do. He's going to change the way you can buy land and sell land. He's going to change the way the New York Police Department works. He's going to absolutely impose socialist policies, and he's going to defund anything having to do with Israel and make life miserable for Jews. These are the people that were on the street doing the get out the vote for him, and they're talking in this meeting, and they have a list of what they believe Mamdani has promised them. When people look at it, it doesn't feel like the sort of thing you would expect a mayor of any American city to do. And then they're talking about how they're going to pressure him, make sure he delivers on what he told us. If these documents that we got, and if these meetings are an accurate reflection of what Mamdani was privately telling the people that were out working the streets for him, Americans are in for a rude wake-up. New Yorkers are in a existential wake up perhaps in the next few weeks. We'll have to see which Mondamini we get. Is it the guy that was cool and suave, or the guy that was kind of unhinged last night in his speech?
John, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for your work, and
Thank you,
we'll
Dr.
look
Drew.
for you at Just the News.
Love your
sir.
show. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. All right, very quickly, we're going to check in with Paul Mauro. Paul is an attorney. He's a former detective with the NYPD. And I want to get an update from him on the Dearborn, Michigan terror suspects. Paul, you there?
I'm here.
So what do you got for us on the Dearborn, Michigan group?
Well, they made the initial arrests. However, they put that together. I have some idea how they might have done it, likely picked it up online or using a source. And then the thing expanded. My old unit, the Intelligence Bureau here in New York City, seems to have been responsible for one of the other pieces that was picked up here in New Jersey. The son, apparently, of a prominent Iranian-American poet who seems to have been implicated somehow, and he's obviously on the other side of the country here in New Jersey. So it argues to me that a lot of this stuff happened in the cyber world. NYPD is very, very strong in that area. And it looks to me like, the case was put together that way. And as they get back subpoenas and search warrants, they find other pieces. And so they made another arrest in Dearborn earlier today.
And for people that don't know, this was a couple of guys that were going to go shoot up, again, there was this Florida shooting, similar shooting of an LGBTQ-friendly institutions, bars, where they just go in and start killing people. They were preparing for that, and thank God these guys intervened. And then the other issue, of course, is the Occupy DC. I read a little bit about that before the show, and it looked like it was a decent number of people. It was not at all what they expected, and their predictions were, and then it will grow from there, when instead everybody sort of served their time that they were paid for and got on the buses they were paid for and went home.
Yeah, that seems to be the MO these days, right? And there's also probably a little bit of protest fatigue. They were all just out there for the No Kings thing. And, as the point you made so well with John Solomon goes, is that what they're advocating for is essentially the dismantling of the legally elected administration in Washington, D.C., which is awfully insurrectionist. The guy's elected, and he's putting in his policies. And in case you haven't noticed, he's working through the courts. He's got a number of cases pending. They sue him left and right, and the cases go into court, and he's been abiding by the decisions. So all this stuff about him being a king and a fascist and all this other stuff, it's really a sidestep from reality. He's going to lose some of his cases, too. I think he's very much on the ropes relative to this tariff case. And doesn't matter, the day after he loses it and abides by it, they'll call him a dictator.
This tariff thing is going to be very interesting. I don't understand how they unravel that if he does lose it or what they do. I'm sort of scared of it. I don't know what's going to happen there. But do you have a prediction?
Yeah, I do. I think that, and I don't know any more than anybody else. I don't have a source on this or anything. Just, you'd have to have a source inside the Supreme Court. But essentially, I think what happens is that they default to their originalist DNA, which is this court has striven to be. I think that really started with Scalia. And they're going to say, look, it says right in the Constitution that power resides with Congress. And while we do defer to the executive having the ability to operate in the foreign policy area, in security, and under emergency circumstances, really comes down to the definition of emergency. And this has sort of been a slow motion plane crash relative to our trade imbalance, and to declare an emergency now. And then you'd have to look at the fact that if it is an emergency, why has there been so much fluidity in how it's addressed? The tariffs relative to China and Canada have been ever changing. So I do think what happens then is that he will rely on, and this he will be in the right on, the fact that there have been trade deals cut already, and those are what obtain. It is an interesting conundrum, though. Because, you'll say, look, the decision is moot relative to Thailand, because we have a trade deal in place with Thailand, let's say. Well, then what happens is the Thais will say, yes, that is the trade deal we have. That is essentially an international contract, and we will abide by it. But seeing as you took $50 million off of us through tariffs that have now been declared unconstitutional, we are going to hire a law firm in Washington to sue the federal government for the return of that money. And so the money that was paid under the tariffs between the imposition of them and the signing of the trade deal, once they're going to be asking for a rescission. Exactly. So I don't know how, I haven't done a scrub on how many nations will be in that conundrum, but really the bottom line here is that all of this could have and should have been done a long time ago by Congress. Donald Trump's not wrong. The trade imbalance did exist. That's why the tariff imposition has worked to reconfigure the international trade imbalance. It's been a good tactic. The problem is it wasn't really his to wield, in my estimation. It's likely going to be declared Congress's.
Wow. Incredible. Well, Paul, we'll look for you on X, Paul D. Mauro. Also the opsdesk.org, opsdesk.org. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're still here and operating in the shadow of Mamdani, but I guess now we're the resistance. So yes, opsdesk.org.
All right. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Paul.
All right, buddy. Take care.
All right. Coming up, tomorrow is Salty Cracker, buddy. We got there's a lot to talk about, and he'll be reeing his way through the show, no doubt. Do you have the upcoming guest list there? There we are. RFK the Third and Dr. Andrea Wagner is coming in. Miss Pat, Jerry Young Summers coming in. That's a new one. Gloria Carmichael, Dr. Joseph Witt-Daring coming back. So a lot coming our way. I do think we'll be keeping up on shows pretty much all the way through November, and we appreciate you all for being here. Maybe be able to reinstitute that first week of December, Caleb. It's looking like that's going to be back on the schedule. So please tell, because that trip, the production schedule I was supposed to be involved with that first week of December just got canceled, so we can keep ours going. So that being said, tomorrow is at noon, which is 3 o'clock, correct? 3 o'clock Eastern time.
Yeah, it's a little bit earlier tomorrow.
Noon Pacific, right? I've got to do Greg Gutfeld tomorrow. So it's going to be 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific, with the one and only Salty Cracker. We'll see you then. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. Emily Barsh is our content producer. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.